All my followers and connections, good morning. And I'm so excited that we are already rolling into February. So I want to welcome you to my show here, What's Happening at Work. And this is a show that I've been running now for a couple of years. And every so often I take a hiatus and I'm back. So looking forward to your comments, your feedback and your thoughts and ideas. This is about learning. This is about us looking at what's happening in our workplace. How is it impacting us? We're discussing things like wellness, competency, coaching, psychological safety, conflict. What's impacting our wellness at work? What's causing us stress? And as you well know, um, I did the I did the trend, and I did a post here on LinkedIn talking about the trends for the future of work, what to look for in 2023, what you need to do differently. And one of the posts that I did in my newsletter, we talked about in that article, I talked about the types of training. And as you know, we have a training company and we provide training. And some of the areas and trends this year, we're looking at DEI conflict. We're looking at communication for our Gen Zs and tail end of our millennial in the workplace. So some of the issues that are coming up, and I have the luxury, rather, to say of having my hands in these things on a daily basis. So it's always cool to share some of what I'm doing, hear from others, but also to talk to other practitioners in the field. And that's what we're going to do today. So this morning, we have Yvette with us. And I'm going to welcome my colleague here with me. And if you don't know Yvette Durazo, she is based in California, and I think she's in Mexico now, right? I mean, we're in Canada. And so, welcome, Yvette. It's so good to have you join me this morning.
Thank you, Joyce, for inviting me over to your live event here. I really appreciate your connection and I look forward to talking about the very interesting topic that we're going to talk about today.
Absolutely. And welcome, everyone. Hi, Adasa. One of the things we're going to be talking about is DEI conflict because you, like me, are a conflict specialist and you've even written a book, right? Your book
Yes.
is tell us a little bit about your book.
The book is called Conflict Intelligence
Mhm.
Quotient, Conflict IQ. And you can see the little picture right on the back. And it's
Yes.
the underneath title is the missing piece to turbocharge leaders and organizations' emotional intelligence.
Excellent. And conflict is such a big part of our life on a daily basis. But what often happens is when we have day-to-day conflicts, where we ignore them, sometimes we let them escalate and things. But with the landscape changing in our workplaces and becoming more diverse, we no longer have that luxury of ignoring conflict. So tell us a little bit about what you've seen, what has changed, and what makes you passionate about this topic.
Thank you. Well, I know that you have been in the field more than I, but I remember when I started probably about 12 years ago. I started my consulting business and I was going out there doing the network. And I would notice that when I would talk to certain leaders in organizations, they would say, Yvette, don't say that you're a conflict resolution specialist. You should remove the word conflict from your title or from the consulting and and I realized that it was for the leaders was a very sensitive word
Yes.
versus I coming from that field and learning the potential and the possibilities of transforming conflict or seeing conflict as an opportunity. I realized that it was not very well syncing with the leaders. Now, how many years pass forward in the past 4 years, we notice that conflict in the workplace cannot be ignored, just exactly like you said, Joyce, cannot be ignored because lives change, circumstances have changed, and people have changed. Therefore, we have to really realize that there's always conflict everywhere in the workplace, right? Whenever
Mhm.
there's two people, there's always a potential to have misunderstanding, issues of communication, and conflicts can arise. So with that, it has changed back, so that I can easily say, yes, I'm a conflict resolution specialist, and a lot of people in our communities, in our business communities, don't understand what we do. And why are we so valuable to organizations? And I'm so glad that we're here together, so that we can inform and educate our business communities, so that they know that they can have a confidentiality, trusted, worth professional that can help them in so many different ways. And that's why we can touch bases and talk about how we can be of value in the interesting part about diversity, equity, and inclusion, where everybody out gets out there doing consulting work and implicit bias training and allies training, but they have missed the particular aspects about the area of communication when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion topics. Those are very difficult conversations that really need a very well trained facilitator to do that, or be able to have a consultant come in and really help facilitate individuals in their organization in order for them to lead these type of difficult conversations in a very successful
Absolutely.
way.
Absolutely. And it's so important to specify and help them to understand the differences it make. And so we're going to just pop a little video on, and then we're going to come back and talk a little bit about some of the stories and some of the realities on the ground and give some example. So people know that this is real. And even if you're thinking, oh, my conflict is not that bad, we're okay. We don't really need help. And sometimes they're saying to me, Joyce, we don't have a conflict. We just have, it's just a situation. And situations need help to solve. Let's come back in a moment. This is Joyce Citizen, and you're watching the What's Happening at Work. So, welcome back. Guest is Yvette DeRusso. And, Yvette, for yourself as a diverse practitioner in the field of conflict resolution, how have you been able to use your skills to help organizations? Can you give us an example?
Yes, before the word diversity, equity, and inclusion was brought in a couple of years ago, I was already doing what in the back, back in the days we used to call it multicultural, or
Multiculturalism, yes.
multicultural, or binational, culturally sensitive, knowledgeable, and aware. That
Mhm.
those were the terms that I would say that I do the work that I do with the specialty in cultural awareness, knowledgeable, and in awareness, right? So I study international business through my bachelor's degree with emphasis in Latin American studies. That, and not only that, but also being brought into the U.S. Mexican border gave me a very distinct way of seeing life, and knowing that because we have diversity backgrounds, cultures, ethnicities, and all of these variety of things, we, we can definitely run into difficulties or communicating when it comes to communicating with one another. So with those lenses, I was already giving trainings and things like that in that area. But then eventually the word DEI became very famous, and I added that so that I could be recognized
Mhm.
as somebody that not only because I am a representation of a person of color, but also because I have the background and the knowledge and the education in that field of work. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Was interesting because, as you well say, I know back. I've been doing this work for 26 years. So it used to be multiculturalism. It used to be cultural awareness. It used to be diversity awareness, sensitivity training, all of these things, and the name has changed. And now it's EDI. It's EDIJ. There are all these acronyms now. I just stick with DEI because it include all diverse groups. It include the reality of inclusion, and I don't want to at any point be speaking where people don't understand. This is such an important topic. It's not about fancy names and what it's look at. It's actually real boots on the ground, people who are attempting suicide because they have been mistreated at work because of their gender, nationality, ethnicity, religion. It's those are the issues that are so important. I would not dare take the risk of naming it something that they don't understand. It's people from different orientation who are mistreated or ignored. It's really about including all diverse groups of people with biodiversity who are not allowed to be themselves at work, who are being taken advantage of, who are being mistreated. And I get to see that on a daily basis. Sometimes it makes my skin crawl. And but I with my work, I can sometimes say to the organization, this is not right. Right. And most of the times the organization brings me in, but there are times employees are tapping on my shoulder and they're like, why don't you work for my workplace? We need you. Well, I can't invite myself into your workplace, but I do work with the employees who come and work with us. So we have quite a few comments in our comment section here. Someone said, um, I asked, have you ever had a conflict? And someone said, yes, they've had. So we are really very, very, um, we're very conscious of those issues because people are facing it on a daily basis. People are actually facing those issues, and we need to help them to be able to survive work. It's unfortunate that
Well,
we have to talk about surviving work. Thanks for joining, Christopher from New York City. When we talk
well,
about diversity conflict, yes, go
I
ahead.
wanted to add to that not only am I what is it knowledge knowledge wise, I learned about conflict resolution, negotiation, peace building, which is the entire field of alternative dispute resolution. But I went through my own series of experiences myself. And I know what it's like to be in a workplace in where I was bullied, where I have cliques, where I was micromanaged. I know
Hmm. Yeah.
what is that feels, and I know firsthand what happens to your health when you stay for too long in these type of environments. So I went through those experiences thinking I really wanted to become a specialist in this field. I wanted to become a subject matter expert.
Hmm.
And life gave me that, gave me the opportunity to really feel it firsthand. Because to be honest with you, if I would have read in a textbook that, and actually you don't find it unfortunately in a lot of textbooks or in a lot of actually I very rarely see a lot of articles talking about this at the health loss that you ended up with when you are in a toxic environment.
Oh, yes.
um, but since I lived it, I know what can happen to you, and I know that leaders in the organization think, well, that person was sick because they were weak, or maybe they were dealing with things in their own home.
Hmm.
They're dealing with stuff in their own life. And let me tell you that I was dealing with stuff in my own life for the longest time. And then on top of that, that happened that microaggressions, bullying, micromanagement, clicks, all of that I start having in a particular job.
Hmm.
And I was resilient because I was studying this and I was also studying to become an executive coach. Those tools really helped me to sustain what I learned later on when I ended up, losing my health because of it, is that prior to me going into that route of having to ask for disability, these same person had already sent home several people that were in a higher position than I. They were professors, they were executive leaders in the organization that I worked, and I didn't know about this. But somehow I was resilient. I had the culture that they make you think that you really need to work hard and stick to whatever happens because you have to be a good employee. And I did that. And obviously, my health deteriorated. So um, that is where I understand that the reality is that we spend 80% of our waking hours inside the workplace.
Hmm.
And if that environment is not conducive to have those psychological needs of having autonomy, of having space where you belong, and not having a place where you're learning from the environment, which are the three key ones,
You
you're
know,
not going to do well.
that's really
And
interesting that you were sharing your story of being in an environment where you impact. One of the things we do at Interpersonal Wellness Services is we look at the intersection between diversity and well-being, and we know that these type of conflicts cause psychological uh, ill health, and it causes mental health breakdown. It causes all kinds of physical ailments, and people need to feel safe at work. And when they're not feeling safe at work because of who they are, their identity, that's one of the things that's unique about the diversity conflict, is that sense of diversity, that infringement on who you are, that's almost like who you are, you're being punished because of who you are. Your ethnicity, your race, your gender, your orientation should not be a cause for punishment and mistreatment and ill treatment, right? And Christopher talked about here, one of our listeners, that some organizations advocate for positive conflict resolution and some advocate for punitive conflict resolution. Well, we're seeing situations where employees who are biodiverse, like employees who are, they might have a developmental delay, they may have vision loss, or they may be on the spectrum of autism, or so many of those employees, or
and then
or
you
physical
have
disability in
right.
mobility issues are being mistreated. We have people who are being mistreated because of their weight and their size. So there are all these different diversity, or when we look at the whole biodiversity that's coming, and then as our society, workplaces become more diverse population wise, because especially here in Canada, where we immigration is the only way we can grow. We're very underpopulated, and so our population continues to become more diverse and more multi ethnicity, race, culture, religion. We have to be even more curious about, okay, so when we don't agree on things, or when we don't see things the same way, how are we going to do? And so all of these diversity training are missing, as you said, that unique lens of how do we have those critical conversations? When is it a time to let something slide? When is it time to address something? When is it time to sit at the table? When is it time to, we cannot go, I always say you cannot play baseball with a tennis racket. So we can't treat all the diversity conflicts the same way. We have to be able to analyze what exactly is happening. Who are the parties? What's the dynamics? What are the nuances? And then be able to come up with the appropriate solution for that conflict. because even we know, even as an intervener, we change the dynamics of the conflict when we come in. As a leader, when you try to intervene, you're going to change the dynamics of the conflict. Are you prepared for that? And do you understand how to maneuver through those situations, especially when you're dealing with these sensitive areas of diversity, inclusion, and equity, where people's diversity and their sense of self becomes very much a part of the conflict?
Yeah, and I would gonna add to that, and because I also experienced it firsthand, then you have all these invisible health illnesses that people look pretty well from the outside, but they're dealing with healthy issues in the inside. And the
Yes.
only person or the only individuals that can know in the organization are HR, right? Because you go and disclose that you're dealing with a health issue and you
Yeah.
need family medical leave and all these
Mhm.
things. And all of a sudden you're not functioning to your best because you're somehow having a flirt, your immune system just went whack. And a lot of these autoimmune that we're having lately because of the environment pollution and all these things that are happening nowadays, those are other things that I have been noticing and that I also advocate for, because a lot of people don't know that these things really exist, right?
Hmm.
And and that, it creates issues in the workplace because, first of all, you have your privacy, that you don't have to disclose these things, yet somehow you're functioning very differently. And then other coworkers are seeing you in a different lens, and then the bullying starts, or the click starts, or they start judging you or criticizing you when you're dealing with a health condition. And yes, from the outside you look perfect, but from the inside you're not somehow functioning properly. That goes with mental health illness. And nowadays, with everything that has happened in the pandemic, all the changes that we have been in constantly going through, it's really changed our way of seeing life. It really changed our neurons in our brain. Constantly going through change, it's a trauma. We
Mm-hmm.
have, as a society, global society, we have gone through trauma, and
Yes.
we still continue to experience
Let's
the
continue
trauma.
that point. Let
Yeah.
me just do a reminder. This is the What's Happening at Work show with Joyce Citizen. And my guest today is Yvette, and Yvette Durazo is joining us. Yvette, I hope I'm not killing your name. And and it's just Durazo, right? And as we
Yes,
see,
Yvette Terraza. Yes.
Durazo, yes. And Yvette is, of course, she bring a different nationality, different lenses to the conflict. She's, what are you, trilingual or multilingual? How many languages
No,
do you speak?
actually, just bilingual, Spanish and
Bilingual,
English.
bilingual.
Yes.
Okay.
But I
And so,
understand all the different cultures because I was raised first of all, in the border between Mexico and the United States,
oh,
but then
really?
I was born in San Diego and raised there, where they call it a melting pot. We have many
Yes.
different ethnicities, and we have everything right in San Diego, and such a small piece of land.
Yes. And so definitely you get that diversity and recognize how important it is for us to be able to live in harmony, even though we're diverse, and work in harmony, because in the workplace is where we spend most of our waking hours, really, is in the workplace. And it's just as important for us to have healthy relationships at work as it is for us to have healthy relationships at home. So we need to remember that when we're working with others, we need to pay attention to how we're interacting with them. And one of the courses that I run is Decoding DEI Conflict. And in that course, I'm teaching people how to understand DEI conflict and how it's different, and the nuances of it and why it's important. And I know you do work around conflict resolution, and you had a story of being called in to take over a DEI conflict when after a leader started. Do you want to share that with our audience, how that went?
Yes, and I'm so thrilled to hear that you have that type of training and certification. This is very much needed. Um, when the unfortunate situation with George Floyd happened, months passed, and all of a sudden, companies started, raising their antennas that they needed to do something about it. So I was already working with an organization, and I was almost finishing up a project with them. I was building a conflict management program for them, and all of a sudden they called me back because the equal opportunity department started getting a whole bunch of formal complaints, and all of these having commonality that they were coming from these type of communication or group communication that they were having with the manager supervisors with their direct reports. So I said, well, so what happened? So basically, they explained to me that the executive directors of the organization called on a meeting to all the managers and all supervisors and mandate them to start having these type of group conversations with their employees. So they send it off their way to do that with no training, with no framework, nothing. They started having these conversations, and managers, supervisors, they're not trained facilitators.
Mhm.
Some of them might be trained facilitators, but in reality, not many, especially in this organization that is a governmental organization that unfortunately, employees there don't get all the trainings, the most updated trainings that in a private sector companies get to give to their employees. So basically, the direct reports were saying, well, my supervisor, my manager is racist because I tried to say this comment in a meeting, and he responded or she responded very aggressively, and because they were not trained to become facilitators. And as you probably know, Joyce, being a facilitator takes a whole bunch of skills.
Mhm.
And then being a facilitator, when you're having difficult conversations, takes an add-on type of skill. You have to have a level of neutrality. You have to perhaps have a level of understanding how to mediate in between situations that are happening in the group settings.
Mhm.
So I went in back and I created a training. I started training the managers and supervisors, and those formal complaints were removed from the EO office because they realized, that it was because these people were not trained.
Mhm.
And they realized that they were the managers and supervisors were not meaning to be that way, but basically the reality was that they were not trained how to facilitate these conversations in DEI.
Wow, that is so interesting because it reminds me of a situation where I had something similar. One of the things we do is we run a coach training program. We train and certify leaders on how to have be relational and have those difficult conversations. Remember, a leader came in and he says, I was told to lead people and I don't have the skills, and people are telling me all these things and I don't know what to do with it. And it's the same with the I conflict, especially if you are not a person from a less, from a diverse group, and you've never ever had those lived experience, and all of a sudden you're now mandated to go have these tough conversations and talk about diversity. Well, the reason why they're aggressive is because they're fearful. They don't know what to say. We had situations where when employees talk to leaders, to other employees, they're like, we're not racist, we're not racist. And it has nothing to do with racist. People are just asking questions, but they lack the skill of how to respond or how to understand or deal with the nuances, or they've never had any experience of talking about race or gender orientation or biodiversity, inclusion issues, equity issues. Simple thing like asking for accommodation or time of work. It's becoming huge diversity conflict in the workplace. Lack of equity between and then we're seeing levels of leadership conflict happening because of diversity. And so or DEI, some inclusion, some are equity. And so these are the situations that we want to shed light on and we want to help people to be able to resolve, because it's time. It's time. We cannot sweep these under the rugs anymore. People are more aware of what's happening. People want solutions. People want to work in a healthy environment. People don't want to be sick at work or sick because of work. So any last thoughts you want to share with my audience before we wrap up, Yvette? What are some key things you think people should be looking for when they see DEI conflict at work?
Well, what we were discussing, it's extremely important to make sure that these people that are facilitating that conversation either are trained well, or they bring a person that has that level of expertise that we have as neutral individuals that can come in an organization and start helping to develop these type of conversations, and then train the trainer, right? Train people that are going to have these facilitated conversations, because as you know, companies, we're allowing these volunteer processes to happen organically, thinking that they were going to go away, and they're not going away,
Nope,
right?
they're not.
People are continue and want to continue, doing these affinity groups, ERG groups. People are doing it voluntarily, right? uh, but at the same time, the companies need to put also their best effort to really train them, to give them resources in order to for them to be successful, right?
Hmm.
And one of the good things that has happened in last year was that uh, now companies are more accountable to really have these diversity, equity, inclusion
Yes.
groups happening in order for them to be quoted as good companies to work for, or
Mhm.
that they can be considered into the stock market and stuff like that, which I think
Absolutely.
is great.
Yes, they're definitely markers and KPIs, and all of those things are happening. Eva, thank you so much for being on the show today. And for those of you who joined us live, thank you for being here and joining us and sharing your comments. We enjoy those. I'll be going back on and look at the feed and answering some of your questions. So we'll keep the conversation going in the feed after the show. So even feel free to join in there as well. And yes, let's talk about DEI conflict, because it is here to stay. And we have to learn how to respond appropriately so we're not creating bigger issues or expanding or escalating those conflicts. Take care, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye bye.